Hi to everyone. Thank you for joining me today for this talk about the impact of the COVID pandemic on the top risk of SkyGuide, the company I am working with. My name is Joachim Schulte and I am a risk management practitioner working for SkyGuide, a mid-sized company in the aviation business. The purpose of my talk is to share my experience and hopefully also to learn from others, a kind of cross-fertilization, if I may say so. This is why I encourage you to keep the session interactive by asking questions in the comment section below this video. I will cover in this talk what we did at SkyGuide about 1 month after the start of the COVID pandemic to assess its impact in terms of risk in order to help management to take appropriate decisions. I will in particular show what business changes have been made based on the results of this analysis. So let's get started. But before diving into the main topic of this talk, I would like to lose a few words about the company SkyGuide, where I am risk manager. This will allow you to better understand the business, but also the risks which are associated with the main activity of the company. So what are we doing at SkyGuide? This slide is a summary of the core business at SkyGuide. Even if you see aircraft on the screen, we are not an airline and therefore we do not have any aircraft. We are doing air traffic control, which means that we provide air traffic control services to our clients. Our clients are mainly airlines. This slide shows a summary of our activities. First of all, allowing aircrafts to take off, then guiding aircraft from a point A to a point B in the upper airspace, and then guiding aircraft to the destination airport. This is this part of this slide. And we do this in a hopefully safe and expedite and efficient manner with, of course, air traffic controllers who do the job at the sharp end of the business, and with the support of a technical infrastructure like radars, communication, and surveillance equipment. Aircraft need this because they are basically blind. This is why air traffic control services are needed and are available basically almost everywhere in the world. This slide shows why air traffic control services are needed. Here you can see on the screen in black a map of Switzerland, which is here, a country which is about in the middle of Europe. We have around 3,000 flights a day, and they need to be managed in a safe, orderly, and efficient manner. In green, you have the flights which are controlled by SkyGuide, and in yellow, you see the flights circumnavigating the Swiss airspace. So it looks like a spaghetti plate. The traffic is dense and complex, even if you don't have this impression. If you look at the sky, there are a lot of traffic, in fact, up there. A lot of flights with horizontal crossings, as you can see here in green on the screen, but also vertical crossings from aircraft in traveling upwards from major airports which are just below the main green crossing point. And this density and complexity generates risk which need to be managed, and this is the purpose of the company managing the traffic flow, the green traffic flow that you can see here on the screen. What type of risk do we have at SkyGuide? First, we have many commonalities with any other company. We have strategic risks, of course, we have financial risk, reputational risk, and so on. But we have one particularity, being in a high reliability organization, and this particularity are the safety risk, which are important for us. And here we go into the details of the topic. It is our core business, provide services, and here we have a full team dealing with this kind of risk. There is also a very tight national and international regulation applicable to those safety risks. And here, as you can see, there is some difference between how wide we go with almost all type of risk and how deep we go with one category of risk or one type of risk. Those are the safety risk, which are basically avoiding any incident or accident in the airspace under the management of SkyGuide. So globally wide, we are globally wide with our enterprise risk management framework, and locally deep with the analysis and the management of safety risks. Now let's go into the main topic of this talk. What is the initial situation? The initial situation in March 2020, we did a few weeks before March 2020, so the start of the pandemic outbreak in Switzerland, we did a risk review, in fact, in February 2020, so a few weeks before. And this is why in this risk review, the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak has not been taken into consideration. And this is why we needed to conduct an additional, what we called an additional scenario analysis, taking into account, taking into consideration the COVID-19 pandemic. This is what we have called an additional scenario analysis, and here the objective of the analysis was to analyze the effect of COVID-19 on our top risk. Our top risks are the most important risk that we have in the company. We also said we only want to analyze the direct effect of the pandemic, which are those direct effects which are the only one which are taken into consideration. So we do not take into consideration the butterfly effect, so the consequence of the consequence and so on. The underlying idea behind this analysis was that risk management should help the company make difficult decisions during the pandemic outbreak. As most companies, we also use a traditional risk map. As we all know, this tool is not perfect. In fact, it's far from being perfect. It has several shortcomings, but I don't want to go into that topic here. It has, however, so the risk map has, however, the advantage of simplicity and to be well known and understood by managers. So what do we see here? We see, first of all, a horizontal scale which assesses the likelihood of the risk, and a vertical scale which assesses the impact of the risk. And here I must mention that our vertical scale is an aggregated monetary scale. It is expressed in monetary terms, but does not only integrate money, it takes also into consideration, for example, reputation and other criteria. So how does it look like in our portfolio before the pandemic outbreak? So this was in February 2020. What we can see is that we have 24 top risks, with one top risk which is here in green. Here it's green not because it's good, because it's simply the category which is green. It refers here to the risk from the external environment, which has occurred. This is the pandemic risk. So the good news, in fact, is that we had already identified the risk of a pandemic within SkyGuide. It was quite high, in fact, before the pandemic outbreak in February 2020. So now this risk has in fact occurred, and the question is, what is the effect of the occurrence of this risk on the other 23 top risks, which are grayed out here on the screen. So in total, 24 risks. One risk is occurring. There are interdependencies between the risk, and the analysis should show what is the effect on the other 23 top risks, and this is the aim of the analysis. So we went through the top risk one by one. So the top risk I mentioned here on this first in this first column. Then the effect is mentioned here. The concrete effect on those top risks is mentioned in the second column here, and those are the new values after taking into account the effect of COVID-19. So let's take an example, bankruptcy of major customers. Our customers are airlines, so the airlines have been severely hit by the pandemic. This means that this risk due to COVID-19 is highly increasing, in fact, and those are the new values of the risk bankruptcy of major customers after the taking into account the pandemic outbreak. Then there is another one, economic downturn in the aviation industry, which is also increasing due to the outbreak, the pandemic outbreak. Then we have several risks which are not affected here. There is no evaluation here in the last column. This means that there is no effect of the pandemic on those top risks. Then we have also something which was in fact surprising to us when we did the analysis. One risk here is positively impacted. This is why the arrow is going to the left, which means that the likelihood of this risk is decreasing. And this risk is the introduction of new accounting regulations, which is an important topic for SkyGuide. And due to the financial dire situation, the probability of having new accounting regulation imposed on the company is decreasing. And this is a positive effect. This is why it is green. And we did this basically for all top risk which you have seen before. Those are the first 10 or 11 top risk. Then we have another slide with the other top risk. Here again, we have one risk which is severely impacted by the pandemic outbreak. Then again, we have one risk which is positively impacted. This is the risk of creating additional delays, and this risk is decreasing because of the pandemic outbreak, because the traffic basically is decreasing. This is why the risk of the company producing delays is also decreasing. Then the last one, an important one, liquidity shortage. This risk is also increasing, in fact, up to 100%, meaning it is becoming a problem and not a risk anymore due to the pandemic outbreak. So as you can see, the bandwidth of the effect of the COVID-19 outbreak are quite large. They can go from a slight positive effect to a highly negative effect on the top risk. It's a little bit like the effect of a COVID on human beings. Finally, you can have almost nothing up to death, basically, and this we can also see in this analysis. If we sum up those previous table and go back to the risk map, we can put on the risk map the effect either positive or negative of the pandemic outbreak on our top risk. And the arrows indicate movement of risk according to the analysis that you have seen on the two previous slides. So you have several movements, in fact. You have positive movements, which are the green arrows, and you have the negative movements, which are basically the red arrows. And here the question remains, basically, because you have something happening, the question remains, what is the overall effect in a quantified manner of all those 7 or 8 arrows? And working with risk maps doesn't allow to answer this question. We have a feeling, of course, that COVID-19 is severely negatively impacting our risks, but we do not know how much. And to assess this, we had to do something else. And what we did is a Monte-Carlo analysis, which is a quantitative analysis allowing to have an overall view of the risk level of the portfolio of our top risk. And this analysis allows us to calculate two important indicators, value at risk and conditional value at risk, which gives somewhat the temperature of the portfolio. So you have here the quantiles in the first column. Here you have the quantiles. And then in the second column, you have the indicator value at risk. I'm sorry, you cannot see the label of the second and third column, but I will read it out for you. This is a value at risk. This one are the value at risk, and this one is the indicator conditional value at risk. And here what you see is the probability density function, which shows how the overall risk profile of the portfolio looks like. So this is the first analysis, shows the probability density function without taking into account COVID-19. And then we did, based on the analysis, we did exactly the same, but this is the bottom part of the slide, with taking into account the COVID-19 effect as shown in the tables that you have seen previously. And this allows to isolate the effect of COVID-19. And what we can see here is that the risk level has massively increased due to COVID-19, unsurprisingly, I should say. The increase is around 40% if we take into consideration the threshold of 99.9%. This is the threshold that we have chosen. We could have chosen another one, but this is a matter of choice. You can choose also 99% or 99.5. We have chosen 99.9, and those are the indicators we have chosen to compare before and after the pandemic outbreak. So here we are around 460 if we take into consideration a value at risk indicator, and after the pandemic outbreak we are around 660. So here we have value at risk and conditional value at risk. Here you can see the labels of those two columns. So as I mentioned, there is a massive effect. The risk level has increased massively, plus 40% only due to the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. And this has to be compared to the usual variation of the risk level between risk review, which are done every 6 months, and which are more or less around plus minus 5 to 10%. So due solely to COVID-19, the variation of the risk level is 4 to 8 times higher than the normal variation between risk reviews. So this is huge. My question to you, do you also do that kind of quantified analysis in your organization? And please comment in the section below this video. So what are the conclusions of this analysis? The first conclusion is that several top risks will not be impacted by COVID-19 outbreak. This is the first conclusion at the top of the screen. It has a green smiley because it is positive, and there are also red smileys when it is negative. The second conclusion is that there is even a positive effect of COVID-19 outbreak on two top risks, and this is also something which is counterintuitive, but we have also to acknowledge this and to recognize this. But on the other hand side, we have 7 top risks which are affected by COVID-19 and which will see a substantial increase either in likelihood or in an impact, or even in both likelihood and impact. So the net effect, when you take into account the positive and the negative impacts of COVID-19, you see a highly negative impact, overall impact of an increase of around, as I mentioned before, plus 40% in the overall risk level of our top risk. The analysis also shows that risk which are currently not top risk that you have not seen in this analysis might substantially increase in the future because of COVID-19 and possibly becoming top risk in the future. Those risks are today not top risk, but because of the pandemic outbreak, they might become top risk in the future, and we had to do something about this. And finally, the last conclusion of the analysis, it's also a negative one. This is why the smiley is in red here. Several impacted top risks are outside the direct managerial control of the company. Think about the economy. Think about risk linked with clients, with the financial markets, and with the authorities. Those are the kind of risks we cannot influence directly. Maybe indirectly through, for example, lobbying actions, but directly those are the risks which are quite difficult to manage directly. The recommendations. What are the recommendations, which are in fact the business changes that we implemented and that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, and which resulted directly from this analysis. So this analysis is somewhat taking the temperature of the sick patient, and the recommendation and the business changes are meant to take action, and if I may say so, to cure the sick patient with an appropriate treatment. So it's not enough to analyze something. The analysis should lead to action in order to be useful. So analysis is not enough. It should lead to a real business change for the company, and this is what we have tried to do here. So first, what did we do? We implemented a closed monitoring of risk which had an important disruption potential on the company, in order for us to increase our responsiveness in case of occurrence, so to be ready if they occur. We have 2 examples here at the top of the screen, and then there is a second action that we have implemented, or we have started to implement it, and which is ongoing, is to review the mitigation actions which are already existing for our top risk, and for those risks which are increasing due to COVID-19 outbreak. We want to investigate, or we wanted to investigate how to strengthen and how to reinforce them. 2 examples of those risks are the risk linked with the strategy implementation and with liquidity shortage. And those the reinforcement of those mitigation actions is currently partially implemented and is still ongoing. Those are the concrete business changes that we have made based on the analysis. So this was my talk about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic outbreak on the company top risk. Thank you for your participation. If you would like to carry on the discussion, you will find my contact details on this slide. And thank you again for joining me today.